And I learned the difference between justice and mercy. In that, like, within a week of going there, the fourth grade class all of a sudden did this weird thing where a couple kids went to the front and, you know, they started this civics class, which I had no idea what was going on. So I asked my neighbor, asked another neighbor, nobody would talk to me. And afterwards, then our sergeant at arms came up and said that I had talked 450 times or some bizarre number of times. Well, yeah, trying to find out what was going on. And I had to write the Owl and the Pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat. They took some money and plenty of honey wrapped up in a 5-pound note a couple zillion times. And now, knowing that I was a new student, you'd think the teacher who was present would have recognized that what I was having a problem with and would have said, wait a minute, let's tell Carl what's going on. But no, they let me dig myself into a deep hole. And so I learned the difference between using the law just for justice or tempering the law with mercy, because they could have stopped it before it gotten very far, but they chose not to, rather performing to the letter of the law rather than what the law was really intended to do. This has later bearing on my entire life, really. Then about in 8th grade, we had to go to Mass. I think it was just 2 years that we had to go to Mass every day during the week of the Passion, Holy Week. We got off Friday for Good Friday, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they dragged us kids out of our classroom and over into the church where we had to go to Mass. Which wouldn't have been too bad, except they read the whole frickin' passage or Passion of the Lord Jesus Christ from each of the 4 Gospels. And that was critical. That was where I began to have doubt, because the conflict on the number of women, the conflicts between the stories, they figured every kid would just forget about, I guess, by the next day. But that's where things started getting itchy, a little bit questionable as to the veracity of what the Catholic Church was teaching. Then 11th grade, one of the teachers gave me the first cause argument, where they assume, well, there must be something that created the universe, and then they go through a whole bunch of worthless argument to come up with the fact, well, therefore there's something that created the universe, and that's God. And that basically pushed me over the edge. Although in 12th grade, the one nun did try and get me to say something about say this prayer every day, essentially a form of brainwashing to get me to believe again. So I got to college, didn't go, I was basically done with the Catholic Church at that time. Searched, checked out some other religions, checked out the Judaism, because the Jewish fraternity was just one house up the hill, and looked into some of the Eastern religions and said it's all the same crap. Somebody's saying, here's this supernatural being that we worship, and you have to worship this supernatural being too and follow its rules. And as I said at the beginning of the program, we don't believe anyone knows that sort of thing. So I was involved with passive non-belief for 30-some years, just passive. I didn't like stirring the pot or anything like that. It was very, I just lived my life, didn't bother going to church. Who cared? Whatever. If somebody asked, I told them that I didn't believe in crap. But then there was the rise of the Christian right in the 90s after Newton, his arrogant and presumptuous band, tried to take control of our country and force the religious rights dogma on everybody. And so I joined Pennsylvania Nonbelievers after my daughter saw their booth at the street fair and talked about it. And I remembered Steve was part of it, Steve Neubauer, and he was a classmate of mine at the Catholic school. And now we're still trying to fight for separation of state and church issues and to prevent the religious right from taking over. So during this time I developed the philosophical basis which demanded evidence that any human whatsoever could actually demonstrate the correctness of a particular dogma. Found that it doesn't exist. No human can demonstrate the correctness of any particular dogma. And the implication also, so that leads the implication that all such dogmas are nothing more than personal preference for a way of life compatible with a person's desired. In no way a universal truth, and in no way should they be allowed to impose that upon anyone else. And that is the whole boring story, not the whole boring story, but it covers pretty much how I got to this point through an understanding of words, what words mean when they're put together, and remembering what people say in one case and what they say in other cases, like the Gospels that are totally are so contradictory to one another. And that's pretty much it. And Cheryl has a few things to talk about. We do have a live call-in show, 846-5067. If you have proven that Jesus has helped your marriage out, tell us how we can enjoy that. Thank you.
Well, and also if you have questions about what it's like to be an atheist in an atheist marriage, you might have something you'd like to know about that, and you could call us and ask us questions. My little presentation is called How I Became an Atheist, a 30-Year Process. And actually it took longer than 30 years to happen. Where Carl's happened pretty early in his life, mine took a lot longer. The first atheist I ever heard of was the father of my best friend in high school. And she told me that he had read a lot, and he eventually believed that there were no gods, and he became an atheist. And I was just kind of fascinated with that idea, didn't do anything with it at that time. Later on, went on to college, and one of my required courses in a religious school, a religious college, was to take a comparative religion course, where we studied not just different varieties of Christianity, but Judaism, Taoism, Confucianism, many different religions, went to services of various religions, and I began to ask myself how all these religions could be true. I also worried about the children who had never heard of Christianity, and yet by the rules of Christianity were condemned to die or be in hell forever because they were not baptized and saved. So the questions began to mount. Then a couple more things happened in my life. I am a cancer survivor. In fact, I've had cancer twice. I've obviously survived both times, but as I was struggling with chemotherapy and with all the things that happen in your brain when you have cancer, I began to think about how unfair it seemed that I was a person who was surviving, and yet many more influential, well-known people who perhaps could raise money for cancer research were dying. And then suddenly surviving seemed random. Who lives and who dies? Who decides that, and what sense does it make? Another question. I grew up in the Lutheran Church, and I gradually realized over a long period of time that I didn't feel whatever we were supposed to feel when we took communion. And then, no matter how hard I prayed, despite Jesus' prayer to answer, if you ask sincerely, certain prayers didn't get answered, ever, even when I prayed them over and over again. Random again, whose prayers get answered and whose don't. Then I started thinking about other crazy things like, what does God do when two football teams pray before a game to win the game? How does God choose? Toss a coin?